Recently, I visited Peru for the very first time in my life. It was without a doubt a trip of a lifetime. Although I had heard many stories of Peru from my brother, who had worked there in missionary service in the early 1970s, I never expected I would visit there myself. Peru is a country with a deep and amazing history. The historical Inca civilization in the Cusco area, including the famous Machu Picchu ancient city, are sites visited by thousands of people every year. This part of the trip, as fascinating and memorable, was not the part that had the most impact on me. When Jim and I arrived in Chiclayo, the area where he had worked and has maintained contact with many people over the years, we were greeted with a welcoming party. At the party, Jim was asked if he would sit and visit with a woman in the hospital who wanted to receive the sacraments of the church before undergoing an operation. This woman, Flor Terapoma, was enrolled in workshops supported by Chalice, helping her with life skill developments in areas which most of us would take for granted. She was learning about self-esteem, human rights, child care, and nutrition. We were told she was a keen learner and was really starting to grow in all areas of her formation. She had expressed to the Chalice workers that these workshops were giving her a new life, and with that new life, she had a dream. Her dream was to one day take her family to a restaurant and order a meal for the very first time. She had never been to a restaurant before. A few weeks before our visit, the woman had walked on a nail and her foot became infected. Where she lives, she did not obtain any medical service, and as she had no money, was unable to have her foot treated properly. The infection soon spread and was now moving throughout her whole body. The Chalice workers, becoming aware of her situation, got her to the hospital in Chiclayo, and it was soon determined, in order to save her life, her foot would have to be amputated. Her first thoughts were, she would rather die than have this operation, as she would never be able to provide for her family, especially her daughter, and all her dreams, including going to a restaurant, would never come true. Jim agreed to go to the hospital and offer her the sacraments of the church and pray with her. She had been baptized as a child, but never received any other sacraments. Both Jim and the Chalice workers insisted that I should go with them, and reluctantly I agreed. Upon entering her room, we saw a very sick woman, hooked up to tubes with hardly the strength to lift her head off the pillow. After Jim had heard her confession, we returned to her room and celebrated the sacrament of the sick and her first communion. She tried to respond to the prayers, but her weakened body made every move very difficult. We then all prayed with her, and upon leaving, I was thinking, I really don't think she was going to survive. The following morning, she had her operation, and her foot was removed just above the ankle, and she made it through. The hospital wanted to know who was going to pay for her stay and her operation, as unlike Canada, there is no universal medical care, and she has no money. Contact was made to Chalice head office here in Nova Scotia, and in short order, funds were made available. We were advised she was starting to show signs of recovery, and so in a few days, we visited her again in the hospital. When I walked in, I couldn't believe my eyes. She was sitting up in her bed, greeted us with a typical Peruvian hug and kiss. Life had been returned to her very sick body, and she was talking and smiling. She thanked Jim for his ministry and wanted to have her picture with us showing her amputated leg. I'm not sure what I witnessed that day. Was it the medical attention and drugs that brought her around? Or was it the power of the sacraments that gave her the strength and the will to survive? Perhaps each of us can decide for ourselves, but I know what I believe because I saw. But Flor's journey is far from over. The medical support and proper living conditions are required in order to make her life somewhat bearable. Her current living conditions are beyond anything we could understand. She lives in a shack behind her in-laws' house with absolutely no services. It is a one-room dwelling with no water, no electricity, and a dirt floor. Her obvious need for better living conditions are necessary in order to ensure she doesn't get reinfected and perhaps lose her life. However, all of these things and more are beyond her reach. After leaving the hospital that day, I made a commitment to myself. I needed to do something for Flor Jaramila Turapoma. We have often heard and perhaps said ourselves that God works in mysterious ways. Was this one of God's mysterious ways for me? I know what I believe because I saw it. We've established a fund through Chalice to receive donations of any and all amounts to help offset Flor's costs. The fund is called Flor's Dream. Anyone wishing to make contributions can do so by making a check payable to Chalice to Flor's Dream, and maybe one day, with your support, Flor can walk into a restaurant and order a meal. Thank you.